Alright, hello everybody. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get started today. We're going to do some watercolor techniques. So what you're going to need is you're going to need, of course, watercolor paper, such as I do have here. You're going to need some watercolor. They can be cakes like the ones I have here, or you can have ones that are liquid watercolor. Any kind of watercolor really works at all. Then you're going to need some salt. And of course you're going to need definitely some water. So we're going to be using some of these things out today. So we're going to go ahead and first we're going to divide up our paper, or just simply mark out some areas. So our first technique that we are going to use is pretty much the classic watercolor technique, and it's called wet on wet. And what that literally means is the first word here means the paper. The second word here means the brush. Right? So, if that's what that means, right? It means I'm going to get my brush, right? Just a nice brush, doesn't have to be very big at all, okay? It means it's really, really dry right now. I haven't put any water on it, so that means I'm gonna get it wet. It's gonna be nice and wet, right? Now, I'm going to get my paper wet, okay? So the first one is the paper. So the paper's got to be wet with nice, clean water, right? I'm going to put quite a lot on there, and I'm going to spread it around. Then I'm going to get some color, okay? Now, when it means wet brush, okay, when it means that, it means that it's fully loaded with pigment here, okay? So it kind of looks, let's see if I could get this to zoom in. See, just like that, okay? Lots and lots of color. Then you're going to put it right on top of that wet. And what it does is it starts to spread out that color very nice and evenly. This is really good for whenever you are actually trying to cover a large area full of color. You can kind of get it all wet first. You can even add more water to it. But it's really good just to spread it around to get a nice even area. So like if you're painting a landscape, or if you're painting a large area like a vase or something like that, you can do the wet on wet technique and kind of make a nice wash. It does make the color lighter, so it doesn't make it as dark as what it was before. Now our second technique is going to be wet on dry. Wet on dry. Okay, so paper, then the brush, all right? So it means my paper is filled with water, right? Nice water on top, right? I'm just painting on some clear water on top of the surface here, right? Then I'm gonna get a dry brush. So a dry brush means I'm gonna try to get as much water as I can out of my brush. And I'm just going to dip my paintbrush in there. Now you see, it's not fully loaded with a lot of water and color. It's just on the tip. It's actually really concentrated. So then I'm just going to go right over that water that I did right there. What it does is starts to dilute my lines, but I can actually see lines and I can see markings. This is really good for whenever you want to make, see, kind of make it almost looking like a jellyfish, right? You can make it look like a jellyfish. You can make some really fine details. You can make some really harsh details. Kind of just mark out where things are, right? See, woohoo! Right, so you can do all kinds of stuff with this one. All right, it's just basically to make everything a little bit more blurrier whenever you paint stuff. Now, the next one is going to be dry on dry. Right? So, paper and brush. Okay, so it means that my paper is dry, which it already is already. Right? Now remember, I'm trying to get as much water as I can out of this brush. I'm just scraping it off the side of my water glass. Gonna get in here, gonna get just a little bit of watercolor on the tip. Real nice and concentrated. I'm just gonna go like this and make some squiggles. Now, as you see, they're very sharp, they're crisp lines, right? This would be really good for whenever you have to put a little bit of water in there. This is really good for when you have little tiny details, when you want to make like maybe little hairs or pieces of grass, when you want to make those really tiny circles like bubbles and things like that, right? So when you have those tiny details, this works really well. It also works really well if you're trying to do hair, right? It also works if you're trying to get some areas in darker color, right? So you can really start layering on stuff here. Your next one that we have is going to be then it's going to be dry on wet. So we're going to put, I'm going to write it right here. So dry on wet. Okay. So paper, brush. This is like how you normally would with watercolor. So you get yourself your brush, right? Get a fully loaded color paint just like normal, okay? Now you can use the side of your brush or you can use it thinner. But as you see, it's different from this one because this is more concentrated, more scratchy, right? This one is like normal watercolor. So you're using a lot of water on your brush to move it around. So it means that your strokes and your paint brushes, okay, are going to be a lot thicker, right? This is for like thicker areas. This is for details. This is just for normal, medium size areas, right? And it actually is a lot more concentrated. So it's not like this one because this one's less concentrated. This is more concentrated color. Your next technique that we are going to do is called salt, okay? This is actually going to be using your salt now. So for this one, I kind of like to lay just a little bit of water down. I'm going to do kind of like a wet on wet technique because the more water you have, the better it comes out, right? And I'm going to get a lot of pigment for this one, a lot of color, right? I'm going to put it right on top, put it right there. Like I said, I'm going to put a lot of color on there. Hopefully you guys will be able to see it. And I'm going to add more water to it because the more water you put on, sometimes the better it comes out, okay? So nice pigment area, nice, lots of water, right? Gotta set that down for just a second. Gonna get myself some salt in my hand here. All right. Now you're just gonna take just a little tiny pinch and you're gonna drop it in there. You see what it does? I don't know if you guys can see or not. But what it's doing is that it's soaking up the water in here, okay? So just like when you eat popcorn or potato chips or something else that's really salty, you tend to get really thirsty too. It's because salt likes to suck up the water, right? It likes to concentrate to itself. So as the salt kind of gets there, let's see if we can kind of zoom in on it for you guys. You see how it's kind of getting in there, right? So it's kind of concentrating all its stuff. Oops, sorry. It's concentrating all its little figures right here. When it dries, these actually salt crystals, well, of course, they'll still sort of be there, but they'll be dissolved. But they're actually going to leave little white circles here. Your next technique is my favorite, and it's called fill. Okay? Really like this technique. This one's one of my absolute favorites. So what you do is you take your paintbrush full of water, right? You're going to make basically a bubble onto your paper, like so. Right? You're just going to actually drop some nice big globs of water, okay, in a nice area. I'm going to make kind of roughly a circle-like shape, right? And then I'm going to take some color. I'm going to actually change my color this time. I can change it to maybe this nice red color, right? So then I'm going to get lots of color on my brush, lots of color. Now I'm going to poke that bubble. Poke. Poke, 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 poke. See what starts to happen? It starts to kind of fill it in a little bit, but it starts to swirl some paint in there, right? It's a lot of fun. So if you wanted to have two colors on there, kind of intermingling, and get another color. Let's get some of this yellow color. That'd be fun, right? So pink on that side. Maybe drop in some yellow on this side. Kind of have them two swirling together. Maybe make an orange color, right? So I'm just gonna let that sit. That's how you do fill. Now your next one that you're gonna do is called avoid, right? Avoid. This one's very simple, very easy. It's almost like a fill, except for you're going to just avoid a space. So let's say you were going to do a flower, right? You said, oh, I only want to do the flower without petals, you know. So I'm gonna leave the center alone, but I'm just gonna do some leaf-like shapes. Now you might be able to see a little bit of it with the color I have. All right, so I'm gonna kind of just put some water down on here. Now I can see this, you may not. Now I'm gonna put this here. I'm gonna get some color. I'm just gonna plop it in like fill. All right. Now you see I'm avoiding areas. See how like I avoid the center here? Just dropping them into those dots of water that I laid down before. Okay. See how I avoided the center? Okay. Avoid means you're avoiding certain areas. All right. So you got to be able to control your brush. Now that was a wet on dry. Okay, that was more like a wet on dry, or like a dry on wet. Okay, so your paper was dry, and then you had a nice brush full of water, right? And you just kind of drew out with the water instead, right? So that'll look pretty nice whenever it's done. Your last one that you're going to be doing is called scratch. Scratch. Okay. This one is pretty interesting. You're going to take something like a sharp object of some sort, or just something kind of piercing. If you have tacks like this works out really well. If you don't have something like this, I mean, I've even used an earring at one point. That kind of works. You just need something that's kind of pointy at the end to where you can make marks into the paper. So I'm going to scratch up my watercolor, but not too hard, not to where I'm poking a hole through, right? This is really good for whenever you're doing some texture, or maybe you're doing a large patch of grass area. You know, you want it to look grassy. So you're gonna go like this, and you're gonna get some lots of color. All right, nice brush full of color. All right, you're gonna go right over the top, and look at that. You can see right when I scratched into that paper there. Now, of course, a lot of these techniques work the best when it comes onto watercolor paper. Now, if you don't have watercolor paper, that's fine. You can use any kind of paper. I would not, though, try to use copy paper for the printer because it's a little too thin, okay? Your water is not going to stand on it at all. So you want thicker paper, stuff like a poster board, or, you know, you can even use like cardstock and things like that come in papers. I've had some people even do it onto cardboard before, which was kind of interesting, because cardboard's a little thicker like cardstock. So you can use any kind of paper that you want to use, but I highly suggest to get watercolor if you can. If you can't, then you can use some of the alternatives. But anyways, those are your watercolor techniques. I would like for you guys to give this a try and try to do this on your own. If you have any questions, please let me know. You guys can always contact me. See you guys next time. Bye.